curiosity was your most powerful tool? Think about it. The doors curiosity opens, what you could teach someone, and what you might just learn. That sales call you just crushed, navigating that tense conversation at work, finding that perfect solution for the customer after hours of brainstorming. You guys, each one of those scenarios is all about curiosity. Legit. If you don't remain curious to get to the root of the problem, to innovate the best possible solution, to heck, insert a million things here, without curiosity, you just lost your edge. Hey there, I'm Becky Freemall, and here's what I've got for you. Curiosity advantage. Think about it. Somewhere in our lives, there's this shift away from curious learning to a mindset of knowing, a point in which we fear the perception of being uninformed or that we lack expertise. I say, let's flip the narrative. In Curiosity Advantage, we explore how leaders from multiple verticals and organizations of all sizes, nonprofit and for-profit, overcome the desire to know and instead lead with curiosity. Stick around. We've got some amazing people to introduce you to.
Curiosity, engages us to be lifelong learners. And I think especially when you're around teachers and students every day, I love walking through the halls and hearing snippets from English classes and math classes. And it just reminds you how important it is to always want to be learning, and it keeps you young and it keeps your mind fresh. And that keeps me going every day.
I cannot wait to invite you into today's conversation. Brigitte Foley, the president of Mercy McAuley High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Her focus, the education of high school women and securing the capital needed to do so. If any part of your job requires the ask, requires you to raise funding, you're going to want to stick around.
Brigitte Foley joins us for this episode of Curiosity Advantage. She is the president of Mercy McAuley High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Brigitte, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Mercy McAuley is an all-girls Catholic high school. I might also say shout out my alma mater. Mercy McAuley is one of 5 all-female Catholic high schools in Cincinnati. And your role, Brigitte, is unique in that you oversee operations, the team as a whole, and you're also responsible for the fundraising arm of Mercy McAuley. So you're constantly engaging with the community, you're meeting people, you're innovating new ways to secure resources that are all absolutely vital for an all-girls education. Could you start first by telling us a bit more about your role as president and just the driving force behind why you do it?
I think you summed up my job pretty well, actually.
Thank you.
So the president model, so we have a president and a principal. And so the principal is far more involved in the day-to-day activities with education. She manages teachers. She deals more with the students. And I'm more of an exterior facing role with the school. Like you mentioned, a lot of fundraising, a lot of relationship building and management of the leadership team. And then just the other part that I didn't know I would be as involved with is construction management. We're in the middle of a big capital campaign, so I learned a lot about new windows and doors over the summer. So that was an exciting new skill set to add. But
so if I need to get an extension of my house or anything, I can just call you, Bridget, and you can come help me out.
Absolutely. Right. But one of the biggest reasons that I was so interested in taking this role is that not only am I a product, like you are, of an all-girls high school, and I felt like those were formative years, and I wanted to make sure that that kind of an education is still available for a young woman in Cincinnati, but also because I think that women need to do a better job of lifting each other up. And so in my work experience over the last 20 or so years, have had some experiences that I wish could have been better. And so I wanted to be the kind of leader that would do a better job and really building those relationships with everybody on the team, no matter what the role is, and especially having women take care of each other and really lift each other up to become stronger leaders.
And hearing you say that also just makes me think that you have an entire student body of young women who are watching. And we always hear that it's not so much what you say, but what you're doing. And they're watching the team and they're watching your staff and they're watching your educators and how you all work together. So that's really interesting to
Yeah,
me.
I do. I think it's absolutely our duty to be role models to our young women in the building, and then to the other women who are working there, whether they're a teacher or working in fundraising. And so I think modeling that behavior for everybody and for our alumni who are watching and learning and doing their own thing, I think that's really critical.
You know, of course, this whole conversation is going to kind of evolve around curiosity. And I just wanted to start, first of all, with curiosity when you talk about it as a catalyst for change and how to advance to that next level and take that next best step. And effectively explore how curiosity acts as a driving force for growth, or there's a need for reflection, if you will, when it comes to strategic inquiry. And that often brings unexpected discoveries and innovative solutions emerge, which are wonderful when you remain curious. And with all of that in mind, I would love to talk about curiosity when it comes to making that decision to take on the role of president of an all-girls Catholic school, and just the subsequent strategy that you built to drive that team forward. And so many people in the business world talk about the first 90 days, but those first days, months, weeks, whatever, are really important.
I totally agree. I had a little bit of a leg up because when I took on the role, I had at least worked at the school in prior years. I had not been there most recently, but I certainly knew a lot of the staff and even some of the students I was still very familiar with. But one of the things I did at the beginning was, because I was curious, and even though I had sort of these preconceived notions of what I thought needed to be prioritized, I thought I needed to listen. And so I committed to, and I told the board, and I said I would have 100 conversations in the first 100 days. And so not just my team or internal folks, but external supporters as well. And so I kept track. I had a whiteboard in my office, and I wrote down every person that I had a conversation with, and I accomplished it in less than 100 days. And but
Nice.
I brought in every single staff person. I asked them to make an appointment with me, and gave them 30 minutes, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about people I maybe had even already worked with for many years, but didn't even know things about them, just to be able to spend that time very intentionally and learn about what
Mm-hmm.
motivates them. I also just learned about a few issues that I didn't even know were issues that were actually problems that I could solve fairly quickly. So it was a great experience. I would highly recommend it. I'm not even sure where I got the idea from, but it was a fabulous experience.
I think that's such a great example of leading with curiosity and making sure that, like you said, that people are where they want to be and headspace and role wise. I mean, there are times
Yeah.
when you walk in and you're like, hey, you've got title X, and you find out they really would love to have title Y. It doesn't mean you're going to switch them that second, but at least you know and you understand what's going on and where they're headed. So
Yeah,
I love
we've
that.
made some changes. I mean, I made some changes right away, and definitely some things have evolved over the last almost 2 years, but a lot of that came from those initial conversations.
I think that kind of segues beautifully into the question I wanted to ask you, just about talking about that concept we all hear about: what got you here won't get you there. And we hear it a lot in just about every vertical in the corporate world, whether it's higher education, whether it's secondary education, tech, you name it. Um, but when it comes to that whole what got you here won't get you there, where have you found yourself maybe questioning an established process or a long held assumption when it comes to all girls education, or the conventional wisdom and educational fundraising, because there is a lot of it out there and very well intentioned, um, and what gave you the confidence to challenge what was already in place and get people on board with a new way of thinking, and when you thought, no, the conventional way is the way to go? Like, how do you balance all that?
It's a lot. It's a lot. That's a big question.
I
Um,
know, I know. You're welcome.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly what all the preconceived notions are necessarily about. I mean, I think there's some, if you're coming from an outside network, you might think that an all girls Catholic school has lots of money. And our school does not have a lot of money. You know, we're not very old and we don't have as big of an endowment as I would like to have. And I think the other misconception for a lot of people is that Catholic schools are just for wealthy. And we have a huge diversity of socioeconomic levels in our school. I'm really proud of that. And so it's just letting people know that. I think one of the things that I focused on too is internally building our culture, but also externally. And a lot of that had to do for me with about being transparent. And so I try not to overshare. I do sometimes overshare, which can get me in trouble. But making sure that we're explaining what is the makeup of our school and not being shy about it and not being really proud of things, and then being really transparent, for example, with our employees, like the why behind any decision, why we decided this. I mean, they can't know everything. Absolutely, there are decisions that need to be made without explaining, but doing as much of that as I can possibly. And I ask the leadership team to do that as well. Just explain the why, because other people are curious, right? And it's very hard for them to understand why decisions are being made. And I think we've been really successful at doing that. And so I've seen that in our employee engagement numbers. They're incredible. They've jumped over the last 2 years, and because people they feel heard, they feel seen, and they are understanding why decisions are being made. And so I think that's something that we're really proud of, and it's just helping to propel and to build our culture for sure.
Yeah, and I think being seen and heard, man, it is everything. And to your point, maybe you can't act on it immediately or in the way they want you to act on it, but just being able to speak the words and be like, hey, I'm being listened to. I think that's
Yeah,
everything.
great.
Speak about pivoting, and we all know that the best laid plans don't always take us where we thought. I think in younger leaders or in team members, sometimes they think, okay, they might come to the president, Brigitte Foley, and say, this is my plan, and this is where we're here now, and these are the data points, and this is why I want to take the next best steps or X, Y, Z. And as they get down that path, they realize, maybe that wasn't exactly the best path, but I can pivot, and we can all pivot. Can you think of any times or maybe specific indicators? I don't know if you have that per se that you can recall that you just had to adapt to something that was coming your way and you're like, okay, maybe ABC isn't the correct path and I need to adapt to what's getting thrown my way.
I think we have to pivot all the time. I mean, I think we have to be flexible and nimble. We don't have a huge staff, so I think that allows us to be able to do that. But I think also just having experience, and I don't want to be the kind of leader that's like, well, we've already tried that, so it's not going to work again. I want to make sure that people do have the freedom to make mistakes because you do learn from them. But I think I do have a lot of experience and some wisdom and some years of working that can help guide people so that we can make the best decisions and that we aren't having to scramble and make as many changes as we might, depending on what the situation could be.
I think about pivoting too, and this also goes into curiosity as a conflict resolution too, because you really want to remain open and hear all the different sides. And hey, do I need to adapt or don't I? And who knows if this is true? The anecdote, the meaning of the story to me is what's way more important. But it was one that I heard when I was getting my MBA about this CEO who had an employee come to his office and said, here's my letter of resignation. And the context of it was this particular employee had just made a $1 million mistake. And they were, apologetic, and I'm sorry, and here you go, CEO, or here you go, President, Brigitte Foley, I'm out. And instead of accepting that resignation, the CEO kept that open mind, kept that curiosity mindset, and said, asked a few questions, one of which is, why are you resigning? And the employee was like, because I just lost the company $1 million. And the CEO said, right. And that mistake you have learned from. Why would I let you go and hire someone else who's then going to make the same mistake? I can guarantee you're never going to make that mistake again. And when you just made that comment, it just triggered that memory, that story that I heard in the MBA, just talking about how mistakes really are only failures if you let them. Really, you learn so much from those moments.
Yeah, agreed. I've made some mistakes in my life, and I will tell you, I made a mistake with an employee who I managed, and I that was a good lesson for me to learn. And then I happened to hear somebody speak about failure and growth, that growth really only comes out of failure. And it was such the message that I needed to hear at that minute, because I was feeling really low. And I thought, you're right, I'll never make that mistake again. And I do think that also makes you a stronger leader, because then you give other people the grace that you received as well.
Yeah, and I think it's just listening to your point, whether you're trying to raise funds, whether you're trying to make sure your employees and your team members are in the right positions, that they actually are there to set up for success. Because if they're set up for success, it sets up the organization as, for success. Talk about, if you would, conflict resolution, kind of high level in that regard, whether it was at Mercy McAuley or anywhere in your career, where you really just need it to remain open and kind of absorb, whether it was you that made the mistake and you're like, oh, I really don't want to admit this out loud, but I learned a lot from it. Or someone came to you and said, hey, XYZ, she did this. And instead of you calling the she in right away to say, how dare you, you actually just kind of took that open mindset and kind of listened to all points of views before you decided what the next best step would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am very much a processor, and so I do have to, and I'm an information gatherer, so I do have to have all the facts before I make any decision. I try not to make knee-jerk decisions, because they just don't suit me. They're not usually well informed. I'm not usually comfortable doing that. If I have to, I will. I very much need to sleep on things. I have to think about them. I have to think about them in the drive in the car. I have to, just think about them on a run. And so I have to have as much information as possible. And I do think there's always another side to every story, right? And so, but I do think you have to support your people, and put your faith in them. But there are sometimes you definitely have to make difficult decisions. But
Right.
back to, also, I think if people know that you have their back, then they are far more willing to be as transparent themselves and truthful. And if they don't feel like there will be repercussions, then they're far more likely to be really honest and open with you.
100%. I mean, my background, before becoming a fractional chief marketing officer, was in the world of journalism, and keeping that curiosity about you is really what, at the end of the day, allows journalists to gather the best possible story. And you come to find out sometimes there's multiple sides to the story, not just the other side, but three other sides. And there's probably some truth. Actually, I think every time there's been a bit of truth in every single side. It's the truth is in the middle somewhere in there. And asking those right questions help you make those next best steps. Let's talk about metrics and measurable impacts, because as we all know, in the corporate world, everyone's talking about their data and their metrics and their KPIs, and we could alphabet soup the heck out of this next section if we really wanted to, but we'll roll back a little on that. But how do you typically generate your most impactful ideas for fundraising, your new school programs, when it comes to that structured process and looking at the data to validate the ideas? How many layers do you peel back when you're looking at ways to validate ideas? Or how do you know this is where I'm going to commit some significant resources or investment? Because I would gather you have to make some pretty big decisions that might make me not sleep at night.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a combination. I think it's best practices, especially when it comes to fundraising. I think it's looking at what works everywhere, like at other schools, maybe. I think it's looking at what has worked at our own school in the past. But I am very data driven. I use it a lot. I use it to point out things like in fundraising, events are wonderful, but that's not the best way to make the most money. It's more about building relationships one on one and getting those transformational gifts from individual donors. So, the data is certainly there. The other place that I use data a lot is because recruitment and enrollment are such a big part of, a school, getting more young women enrolled in the school. And so one of the things I did at the very beginning, we were looking at how many students we wanted to have in the class. And so if you look at what you want your end result to be, then how do you back it up? So then you look at how many girls come in to visit the school, how many girls apply, and backing up all of those numbers. And I don't think anybody had ever looked at those numbers in that way before. And so basing our goals and giving goals to my leadership team, especially the director of admissions, saying, this is how many, in order to have this big of a class, we need to have this many eighth graders come visit us. And so really breaking that down, because you can't just throw stuff out there. You can't just say, really, we want this number of kids in the door if it's not realistic. Or if there aren't even enough kids, we look at data of how many girls are in the grade schools at the Catholic schools in our community. And so really looking at all of that data, because it doesn't matter if there are no young women in elementary schools, and how, doesn't really matter how much money you spend on marketing. You can spend thousands on marketing and it doesn't really matter if the kids aren't there. So I think you have to. And I think you have to use your gut too. Certainly. And I think at this stage in the game, they've also hired me to be able to make those tough decisions, right? That's what a big part of what I'm paid to do is all about.
Right. Talk about innovation too. I think, and I also think people use the word innovation like it's this really big word, like I innovated this $1 million idea. It could be like what you just said. Hey, we use numbers in a way we never used them before. But, talk about an innovative idea you championed, whether yours or someone on your teams, and how, or how you took it from that ideation stage to implementation. Lots of good ideas are out there, but a lot of times they get kicked to the curb. When do you go, wait a minute, that might be an idea we should act on?
I think it's all about timing. So one of the ideas that I have had over the last, well, really since I took this position, is how to do a better job of collaborating with my colleagues at the other girls' schools. Like you mentioned, there are 5 of us in Cincinnati, which is a fairly significant number for the size of a city that we are. And so I think about that a lot. We're very competitive with each other. And so I always try to think, again, back to that notion of women lifting each other up. So how can we come together? And we, since 2020, since the beginning of COVID, we've actually been doing this competition with the other girls' schools to raise money, but it's based on how many of your alums, your percentage of alums who give back, which is great because it's a competition and that certainly motivates our alums to give back. And yet I really was trying to think of ways that we could come together, and so that it isn't so much of a competition. And so I had this idea about us coming together, and I knew about a local foundation that is very interested in supporting women in STEM. And it was a foundation that had funded a lot of our schools individually in the past. And so I ran into the woman who runs the foundation office at a coffee shop and accosted her basically, and interrupted her coffee meeting and asked her for another meeting to get the ball rolling, and told her I had this idea about all of the 5 girls' schools coming together to submit a grant application for the foundation. And she loved it and asked if was that easy to accomplish, to get the girls' schools together. And I didn't think it would be very difficult, and it really wasn't. And so I reached out to all the other presidents of the other 4 schools, and everybody was just jumped on board, really excited. We collaborated in a way we have never collaborated. A few of the leaders are brand new. And so we had several meetings. We, put together a slide deck. We worked on it together. Again, just really lifting each other up. And we each took a different part. That was the other thing. Like everybody's a little bit type A leader, obviously. We were all presidents or all presidents, but everybody took a different part of the presentation. And so it was very seamless. And it took us a while. We submitted the grant application, and we just found out this summer that we did indeed receive the grant. So all 5 schools together were receiving $2 million over 3 years, so $400,000 for each school. And the best part, beyond the collaboration, is that we get to keep our own programming. So we're not all using it for the same thing. Each school can keep their own programming or staffing. We're going to try, we have so many ideas, we don't know which one to pick, but so everybody can use it. Like some organization could renovate a lab, and one of the other schools could start a mini class, or just so many ideas. So it's pretty exciting. I don't know if anybody else is doing anything like this. I really would like to get the attention of some other pretty famous women philanthropists and see if they would support something similar, because I would love to see what else we can do. We are much stronger together than we are as individual schools, and we all have the same purpose to educate young women. So I love that we're being funded to do such fabulous things.
And I think that just goes back to how we started our conversation when you talked about how role modeling for young women who are going to be up and coming, the next generations of our career workforce, and how our communities are going to work together. It's not just teaching and lecturing and potentially pointing your finger at them and saying, do this, do that. It's just doing it yourself. Think about all of the young women across 5 all-girls Catholic schools in Cincinnati that just watched their highest level presidents do that.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting. I know. I can't wait to see, we're just figuring everything out. We will just receive the first installment from the grant this October. And so I can't wait to see how we take it, how each school uses the funds, and then we'll use data to measure it. And I hope this is just the beginning of a relationship with this foundation that will go all kinds of wonderful places.
So I absolutely love that story. I could probably talk another half hour about it, but we'll stop there with that question. But when you talk about metrics, and this could kind of point back to that whole story, which is, how do you determine what metrics to track? Because, oh my gosh, could you drown your team in metrics? And so you've got to pick the right metrics. And I would kind of assume that you're going to have a lot of metrics around that STEM grant, because that's a big one. So maybe that points you in that direction. But what metrics do you find are the most important for your role, and how did you determine those?
I think they're always changing. I do think they're always evolving. 1 year, one thing, one kind of measurement might be more important than another year. We do, certainly just tracking, how our supporters give and when they give and what they're really interested in. And then, tracking who's attending our school, and then what are they doing after graduation? What are they ending up? What careers are they selecting? What colleges are they selecting? Yeah, the data is just too numerous to count. And the other thing, and I think this is pretty typical in most schools, of course, we have like 4 different kinds of databases that we use, and half of them don't talk to each other. So, even just, it's a lot. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot to manage, and we are not a well-oiled machine yet. We're getting there, but yeah.
I'm always forward thinking. I'm always thinking about what's down the road and where we had it, so we know how to get there. And I feel like, in a way, you've just kind of answered this question by talking about that STEM grant. But how are you preparing for any big game changers in the future when it comes to all girls high schools over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think, looking at population trends, demographics, certainly in our community is really important. paying attention to funding from the state and how that could possibly change over the next few years. We have to really pay attention to that. And then just continuing to raise as much money as possible so that we can support, everything that we want to do. We have so many ideas. We just don't always have enough funding to support it. So it's never ending in how much money we would really like to be able to raise. But I said it earlier today to the whole team of employees, the number one reason that people don't give us money is because we haven't asked them. So that's on us to make sure that we are asking people. I think the other big shift that's happening with generations is that you're having more and more women who are making financial decisions, that whether they have a family or not, that they are playing a stronger role in how their money is being allocated. And so I think that is going to change. There are also all kinds of data points about the great transfer of wealth as baby boomers pass away, and where that money will go to Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, and what that looks like. Because for some people, they're not as philanthropically minded. The younger generations, they're more about giving time. They're not as much about giving money. And so I do worry about that too. As we lose baby boomers, will that money still continue to be contributed to our school and to other nonprofits?
Yeah, it is true. And you're right. And I wonder, and who knows, we'll find out. But, is it because they don't have the finances? And when they do, to your point, maybe now is the time to start working on that mindset and that narrative of when that generational shift happens with finances. Now that they have it down the line, I'm talking, now that they have it in their hands, what will they do with it?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to change the pace for just a hot second, if you would, Brigitte Foley. Would you play with me some rapid fire questions?
Oh, I can't wait.
Thank you. All right. I was going to go
Remember
through
when
these
I
quickly.
said I was a processor?
Yeah, I try to forget about that, but thanks for reminding me. All right, we're going to make you in an uncomfortable spot then, since this is not your favorite place to go. But here are my questions. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about teenage girls as a president of an all-girls Catholic high school?
I think at the heart of it, teenage girls still have some of the same dreams and hopes that we had when we were teenage girls.
I love it. What's your go-to question when someone brings you a problem?
I ask them what their recommendation is. What do they think should be done? I ask people to bring me a solution rather than just a problem.
Got it. Morning person or night owl for your best strategic thinking?
Morning.
What is one tradition at Mercy McAuley that you would never change?
Oh gosh, never say never, but I do love the raffle. The girls sell raffle tickets, and it's this competition between classes, and you never know what you're going to get from one year to the next. And I think it's a really fun time around school.
What would surprise people most about running a Catholic school?
How much time
you're allowed to speak.
Yeah, how much time you have to spend on the facility, and the fact that we probably work just as hard, if not harder, during the summertime.
That is interesting. Okay, done. I would have been one of those naysayers that would have thought you're all like eating bonbons. I swear I really didn't think you were, but yes, okay. And if you weren't in education, what career would you be curious to try?
Well, if I had any talent in this area, I would sing in a rock band, but I don't have any talent in that area. So I guess I'm stuck.
Maybe you can do that for a raffle. Maybe you could sing in a rock band.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
All right. So before we let you go, I would just love to wrap up with any kind of parting wisdom that you live by, or final thought you'd like to leave our listeners about leadership, education, or just the power of curiosity.
Yeah, I think all of those things, Becky. I mean, I think curiosity, engages us to be lifelong learners. And I think especially when you're around teachers and students every day, I love walking through the halls and hearing snippets from English classes and math classes, and it just reminds you how important it is to always want to be learning, and it keeps you young and it keeps your mind fresh. And that definitely, that keeps me going every day.
I love it. Thank you so much, Brigitte Foley, president of Mercy McAuley High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Brigitte, thanks again for taking the time to share your expertise with me and all of our listeners.
I appreciate you too, Becky Fremel. Thanks for asking.